Liberals are absolutely devastated after suffering crushing defeats across America. In this video, we're going to take a look at the latest admission by the New York Times that the Democrats were indeed demolished, down ticket on November 3rd, how they're trying to fabricate an easily debunked narrative to account for those devastating losses, and how GOP gains across the nation mean Republican dominance for the next decade. You are not going to want to miss this. Welcome, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you, ready to bring you our latest episode celebrating the inevitable collapse of left-wing globalism and the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. We'd love to have you as a regular part of this channel, where each and every day we focus on optimism and encouragement in the midst of all of the defeatist fake news nonsense spewed out by the mainstream media. Before we begin, we've all experienced blackouts, right? Particularly at night, that bizarre feeling when the power grid goes out and our homes go completely dark. Well, we've got an amazing solution for you. I'm preparing for my next blackout with a wonderful device called the Lightbug. The Lightbug is a portable solar-powered ultra-bright floodlight with 3 lighting modes. Because it's solar-powered, you'll never have to worry about wires or batteries, and it comes with a battery indicator so you know how much charge is left. It also doubles as a power bank, allowing you to charge your phone or other digital devices on the go. Plus, it's water and impact resistant because it's made out of high quality materials. It's perfect to light up your fishing, hiking, camping trips because it's so lightweight and portable. But I like to use it around the house as my all-purpose general emergency light. And in celebration of Black Friday, if you click on that link below, you'll get 30% off. So what could be better? Make sure to click on that link below or head on over to lightbug.com and get your emergency backup light today. All right, gang, let's dive right in here as we keep our eyes on the Trump team's efforts to stop the steal both at the legal level and the legislative level. I frankly was shocked to find an article published in the New York Times with this headline: How Democrats Suffered Crushing Down-Ballot Losses Across America. And as I read through the article, I'm not quite sure what the purpose of it was. So at one level, it seems to be testing out the plausibility of a fabricated narrative, fabricated talking points in response to reality that the left at some point is going to have to confront. And that reality is that while President Trump supposedly lost re-election, right, quote unquote, the Republicans absolutely dominated down-ticket contests all across the nation. Now, of course, the left-wing activists disguised as journalists at the New York Times could ignore that inconvenient truth, just like they're ignoring all of the election anomalies that cry out not merely for explanation, but for a full-blown forensic investigation. They have no problem ignoring all the anomalies and irregularities and the thousands of affidavits alleging election fraud and the like. So they certainly could ignore the fact that the Democrats were absolutely bludgeoned at the ballot box down ticket. But the fact that they're addressing this slaughter seems to me a bit more autobiographical. It seems to reflect a deep angst amongst liberals over what really happened on Election Day, because what happened is going to have extraordinarily devastating consequences for congressional Democrats for the foreseeable future. So they got to deal with this. And so here's how the lead, here is how the New York Times is trying to lead liberals into interpreting this massive win with the presidency accompanied by comparable massive losses down ticket. You can see it in the subheading. In state house races, suburban voters' disgust with President Trump failed to translate into a rebuke of other Republicans, ensuring the party's grip on partisan map-making. So now you can see it. The concocted narrative is rather simple. Voters were, in their words, disgusted. Isn't that a nice choice term? Voters were disgusted with Trump, but that disgust didn't necessarily turn them into Democrats down ticket. And just to drive this home, here's where the leftist activist disguised as journalist makes his key point. Quote, across the country, suburban voters' disgust with Mr. Trump, the key to Mr. Biden's election, did not translate into a wide rebuke of other Republicans, as Democrats had expected after the party made significant gains in suburban areas in the 2018 midterm elections. From the top of the party down to the state level, Democratic officials are awakening to the reality that voters may have delivered a one-time verdict on Mr. Trump that does not equal ongoing support for center-left policies. And then he quotes the campaign manager of a Democrat candidate who lost. And here's what she said. There's a significant difference between a referendum on a clown show, which is what we had at the top of the ticket, and embracing the values of the Democratic ticket. People bought into Joe Biden to stop the insanity in the White House. They did not suddenly become Democrats. Now, what I find so interesting with this new Democrat narrative, this Democrat talking point, that voters rejected Trump in disgust while refraining from applying such disgust-driven rejection to Republicans running for the House and Senate and state legislatures. What I find particularly interesting here is how devoid it is of any semblance of reality. Here's some incontrovertible stats from the last election, okay? The New York Times is supposedly so interested in so-called fact-checking rather than frauds. Here's some incontrovertible facts in terms of how much the American people supposedly despise President Trump on November 3rd. Let's start with this. President Trump received more votes than any previous incumbent seeking re-election in the history of this nation. I'll say this again because it's beyond dispute. President Trump received more votes than any previous incumbent seeking re-election in the history of this nation. Where is the hate in that? That in and of itself shatters the New York Times-driven, never Trumper-driven narrative that voters despise President Trump, or even Ann Coulter's latest narrative that voters wanted Trumpism without Trump. If that's true, then why did he receive more votes than any previous incumbent president seeking re-election, including presidents that voters loved, like Ronald Reagan? Let's try another fact. Not only did President Trump receive more votes than any previous incumbent, he actually got 11 million more votes in 2020 than in 2016, which represents the third largest rise in support ever for an incumbent. Just by way of comparison, President Obama won re-election easily in 2012 with 3.5 million fewer votes than he received in 2008, which of course shows how ridiculously unpopular Mitt Romney was, the hero of the Never-Trumpers. Trump got the third largest rise in support ever for an incumbent. 95% of Republicans voted for Trump. He had almost 100% party support. Here's another one. Trump earned the highest share of all minority votes for Republicans since 1960. Trump grew his support among black voters by 50% over 2016. Trump increased his share of the national Hispanic vote to 35%. He killed it among Floridian Latinos, particularly Floridian Cubans, who gave him over 70% of their vote. Can I ask you, where's the hate in all of that? Where's the disgust? Where is this candidate that the New York Times tells me was derided by disgusted voters all across America? Where is he? Can you name me another candidate so rejected as to post numbers like this? And how precisely was Joe Biden embraced? You may not have known this, but Biden embarrassingly won an all-time low of just 17% of all counties in the nation. 83 counties, 83% of our counties voted against Biden. When all is said and done, his so-called margin of victory comes from 4 highly suspected municipalities: Milwaukee, Detroit, Philly, and Atlanta. So let's just start with what I would submit as another indisputable fact. That narrative that's being pushed by the New York Times is itself fake news, which means that we're obviously being lied to. They have this data, right? And yet they're ignoring it. But they are right about the other half of the narrative. And that's the fact that they got their butts kicked in this election down ticket. Now, before we get into the specifics of that, we've got something for you podcast fans out there. As many of you know, we recently launched our brand new Turley Talks podcast, which tens of thousands of you have since been downloading, and I cannot thank you enough for that. And you're going to be excited to hear this. We are now number 6 in U.S. news. We are the 6th most downloaded podcast for trending news in the entire United States. We're just behind Steve Bannon's War Room, in fact, and we have you to thank for that. But you can help us actually become the #1 conservative news and commentary podcast by simply clicking on the link below in the pinned comments section and signing up to download our new podcast twice a day, every day. You can take Turley Talks anywhere you go. So make sure to click on the link below, sign up for our Turley Talks podcast, and let's make it to #1 together. All right, so the New York Times was right about one thing. The Democrats did indeed get slaughtered down ticket. There are 27 toss-up House races going into November 3rd. The GOP won every single one of them, all 27. The 2020 election was so bad for the Democrats that they currently have the smallest House majority in over 80 years. At least 10 Democrat incumbents were defeated on the November 3rd election. And fascinatingly, especially in light of the mainstream Marxist media's narrative of the Republican Party being the home of misogyny and sexism and white supremacy, all the gains that the GOP made, every one of the House seats that were flipped to the GOP, was won by either a minority, female, or veteran candidate. There were now 219 Democrats in the House of Representatives as compared to 209 that have gone Republican. In other words, Republicans are literally just a handful of seats away from taking the House. It actually gets worse for the Democrats. You ready for this? Not only did the GOP dominate in the House, they also dominated the state legislatures in such a way that makes them poised to dominate the House for the next decade. And this is because the GOP is now in complete control of state houses and governorships that will end up drawing maps for 188 congressional districts. That's 43% of all districts. By contrast, the Democrats control state legislatures and governorships that will draw maps for only 73 districts, or 17% of all districts. Republicans control 43%, and we're going to start seeing states go deep red. The GOP has now full control of Texas, Florida, and North Carolina, and that alone means that with reapportionment due to the 2020 census, because of their population growth, those states combined will create approximately 4 new GOP seats starting in 2022, which means that just with reapportionment alone, the GOP is poised to take control of the House. So I'm glad to see that the New York Times and other left-wing rags begin to lament the red wave we saw devastate their chances of controlling the House for much longer. I'm just waiting for a similar lamenting over the fact that so many of the left were so willing to try to steal this election. That's the narrative they need to consider. Now, before you go, make sure to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel. And you'll definitely want to check out my latest video, just posted it, on how whistleblowers are giving shocking testimony in Virginia as Pennsylvania lawmakers move to deny election results. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there.